stories are the foundation of good fundraising. We have to be able to tell stories about what our mission does, what would happen if our mission wasn't in place. I call those deficit cases. But I think it's important to always balance those stories. Sometimes now as a funder, we have groups come in here and they sit and tell us stories, and their stories are great. But sometimes I need a little bit more context. You know, what environment are you operating in? How many other people do what you do? What's your potential? What's your budget? What's your limits? That kind of thing. So I think the stories have to be balanced with a business case of stepping back and helping the donor understand your niche in the community. I see it as a fabric. There's police, there's fire, there's libraries, there's hospitals. What's your niche? Because you have a 501c3, you're supposed to be filling a particular community value. So I think one story that development people don't tell enough is helping the donor understand the context of who they are, what they do, and what contribution they make in general. Like one of my fundraising gurus is Kay Sprinkle Brace, who wrote a book, Beyond Fundraising. And her point was donors give to organizations that meet needs, not because they have needs. So they want to know what you're doing, what needs in the community you're meeting. She used the example of a food bank that needed to raise more money or needed to have a bigger facility. Well, it wasn't the food bank that needed a facility. San Francisco had a hunger problem. And if they could have a centralized facility, they could get more food in and more food out. So it was about meeting San Francisco's hunger problem, not about raising money for a warehouse for XYZ food bank. And sometimes I think we are telling the warehouse story and not the community need story.
Working with media in terms of newspaper or on the radio or on the news in terms of TV is a pretty tricky business. You know, it's really difficult to really understand what's going to make it past a reporter's desk and be okay to go and for them to pitch it to their editor. And again, this really goes back to some of the very basic fundamental principles of development and fundraising, is really building that relationship. And whether that relationship is with a particular reporter or with a particular media personality, I think really understanding what their needs are and what makes a good story is really critical. And there's plenty of people out there in terms of consultants, PR, media consultants that actually really help with that in terms of helping you understand as an organization what is going to be TV worthy or newsworthy. I've been in this work long enough that there's a lot of relationships built up with individuals, individual reporters and TV personalities that you have the opportunity to actually say, what do you think? Is this something that's going to be newsworthy enough to run? And a lot of times they're really honest, and they tell us, it would be better if you could do this, or if you could find us a client that could actually tell their story, and that it makes this much sense. Or if you're really wanting to make a good match, really being reading the newspaper that you're going to want to pitch into and figure out, is there a thematic thing happening here with whether it's an education issue or if it's a government issue or immigration issue, whatever that might be, that there's a natural tie into what's already being printed. Then it gives you the opportunity to actually be able to pitch it for that reason. But again, I think it really comes back down to the relationship with those individuals, the editors, the journalists, to actually say, hey, I've got this story. We think it's very newsworthy. What do you think? And 9 times out of 10, they will be incredibly honest and say, this is great, but let's think about it from this angle. And a lot of times we have the opportunity to think about it in that angle because that is part of the story, and that we can reframe whether it's what our clients are expressing as part of their interview or whatever that might be. So building that relationship is really, really important in terms of building a good media presence in the community.